I almost got married once. The ring was in my pocket, the table was reserved, and I had practiced the words 100 times. But I didn't do it. I walked past her favorite cafe that day without going in. Not because I didn't love her, but because something deep inside me whispered, "This isn't freedom, it's surrender." That voice would haunt me for years. It wasn't fear. It wasn't trauma. It was something older. Something I would only begin to understand after I discovered Carl Jung's forgotten warnings about the male psyche. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At 29, I thought I had it all figured out. A steady job, a beautiful partner, and a future that looked perfect on paper. My friends called it settling down. My parents called it growing up. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a man building a life. I saw someone burying himself under expectations. It started small. A casual comment about timing, a question about kids, a quiet compromise I didn't realize I'd made. But the questions grew louder and stranger. Was I living my life or someone else's dream? I tried to silence those questions with logic. Marriage is normal. Marriage is love. Marriage is what people do when they're serious. But logic couldn't quiet the unease. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I felt like I was being led into something blindfolded. I started researching psychology, trying to fix whatever was broken in me. That's when I stumbled across a quote misattributed to Carl Jung. "Never get married if you are a man." It stopped me cold. Not because it was true, but because I feared it might be. What if marriage for men was more than a ritual? What if it was a psychological trap one Jung had actually warned about in different words? I started reading his work obsessively. The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Psychological Types. That's when I found something chilling. It wasn't a single sentence. It was a pattern. Jung never condemned marriage outright, but he saw something others didn't. The way men unconsciously project their unlived selves onto women, and how marriage often amplifies that projection. That projection, he said, was dangerous. It turns love into illusion, and illusion into resentment. Could that be what I was feeling? I kept going back to one of Jung's most haunting ideas, the concept of the anima. He said every man carries within him a hidden feminine image, not a real woman, but an unconscious ideal, shaped by childhood, fantasy, and myth. And here's the terrifying part: when a man falls in love, he often believes he's found her. But in truth, he's found his own projection, a mirror of his anima, not her, not the woman standing in front of him. That realization shook me. What if I was never in love with her, but with the reflection of myself I wanted to see? And what happens, Jung asked, when that projection fades, when reality intrudes? The answer isn't romantic. It's violent, emotional, and often irreversible. Many men, Jung wrote, blame the woman for changing. But she didn't change. The projection collapsed, and what's left is a stranger. Or worse, someone we resent for not being who we thought they were. That explains so much of what I'd seen growing up. Men who once adored their wives, now dull-eyed and bitter, trapped in a life they no longer recognized. I started noticing it in conversations with married friends. They spoke of love like a duty. Their eyes flickered when they mentioned freedom like it was something they had once tasted but no longer believed in. And the worst part? They didn't even know what they traded it for. They couldn't name it. They just said things like, "That's life," or "It's complicated." And yet, beneath those words, I sensed the same quiet ache I felt in myself, a kind of spiritual claustrophobia. One night, I asked myself the question directly. If I marry her, will I still be me? The silence that followed was unbearable. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did. Something in me would be lost. Not taken by her. Not stolen, but given away. Willingly. That's the part no one talks about. How much of ourselves we hand over without even knowing we're doing it. And once it's gone, can you ever get it back? I wasn't just afraid of marriage. I was afraid of disappearing, of waking up one day in a quiet house with a woman I once loved, children I might adore, and a version of myself I could no longer recognize. That fear wasn't about commitment. It was about erosion, the slow wearing down of instinct, adventure, and truth. I looked at older men in my family and saw it in their eyes. They had played the part well, providers, protectors, partners, but somewhere along the way, they'd stopped being something else themselves. Jung warned that the modern man faces a unique danger, losing his soul while keeping his job, his home, and his smile. He called it psychic death. It's not loud. It doesn't come with flames or collapse. It comes with routine, repetition, sacrifice, disguised as maturity. And for men who never face their unconscious, who never met the shadow within, marriage often becomes the final nail. Not a sanctuary, but a tomb. That idea burrowed under my skin and stayed there. I started pulling away. From her, from the plans, from the future I once imagined so vividly. She noticed. Of course she did. She asked if something was wrong, and I lied. I said work was stressful. I said I just needed time. But the truth was darker. I didn't know how to tell her that I was losing a war inside myself, and she was unknowingly winning. That's the paradox Jung spoke of often. How we invite our own imprisonment and call it love. We mistake surrender for security. The hardest part? She was everything I thought I wanted. Kind, intelligent, beautiful in a way that made my chest tighten. And still I felt the walls closing in. That contradiction nearly broke me. How could I walk away from something so perfect? How could I live with myself if I stayed? I began to wonder if Jung had faced this himself. And that's when I found something strange hidden deep in his biography. A truth that wasn't in his formal writings. A detail that changed everything. Because Jung did get married. And yet, he lived like a man who wasn't bound by it. But how? Jung married Emma Rauschenbach in 1903, a brilliant woman from a wealthy Swiss family. She was loyal, sharp, and deeply spiritual. On the surface, their marriage looked ideal. 5 children, a beautiful home, public harmony. But beneath it, Jung was engaged in something radically different from the traditional role of a husband. He insisted on space, not physical distance, but psychic autonomy. Even in marriage, he preserved a life of deep inner solitude rituals, travel, study, and long walks into the forest alone. Emma accepted this, though it must have hurt. And in return, Jung gave her a kind of brutal honesty few men ever risk. That's when I realized. He didn't reject marriage. He rejected fusion. The idea that 2 people must merge completely to be whole. Jung didn't believe in that. In fact, he believed wholeness could only be found within. Not in another person, not in romance, and certainly not in the projection we cast onto our lovers. That was the real danger, not marriage itself, but the belief that another human being could complete us. That's the myth we're sold. That's the illusion we chase. And that illusion is why so many marriages feel like slow deaths. Because instead of confronting the shadow, instead of facing the loneliness and the chaos within, we try to outsource our healing. We ask another person to carry the weight of our unlived life. But no one can do that, no matter how much they love us. So we resent them. We punish them for not being who we imagined. And eventually, we leave. Or worse, we stay and become ghosts. That's when it all clicked. I didn't have to run from love. I didn't have to fear marriage. What I had to fear was unconsciousness. The part of me that wanted to surrender responsibility for my soul and call it devotion. I almost walked into that trap smiling, and I still might have if Jung hadn't grabbed me by the collar through the pages and whispered, "Wake up." So I stayed. Not in the relationship, but in myself. And that's when the strangest thing happened. I didn't feel lost anymore. I didn't feel lost anymore. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally understood the questions. I stopped asking whether marriage was right or wrong. I started asking, what part of me is choosing this? Is it fear? Is it conformity? Is it the anima, whispering through the fog of my unconscious? Or is it something deeper, a grounded love that doesn't need to possess, fix, or save anyone? And that changed everything. I never proposed. I never sat at that candlelit table with the velvet box in my pocket. I let the moment pass like a tide I wasn't meant to swim in. She cried. I did too. And though I didn't say it then, what I felt was gratitude. Gratitude for her love, for what we shared, for what she reflected back to me, even if it wasn't truly her, but a piece of my own forgotten self. And as painful as it was, I knew I couldn't betray that clarity. Not again. Because in the end, the real marriage, the one Jung wrote about, the one no ceremony can sanctify, is the marriage between the conscious and the unconscious, the masculine and the feminine within. Until that union is made, no relationship will ever feel complete. We'll always be chasing phantoms, always blaming others for what we haven't resolved inside ourselves. I walk alone now, but not lonely. There's a silence in my life that used to terrify me, and now it feels like home. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had said yes, if I had followed the script like everyone else. Maybe I'd be happy. Maybe I'd be numb. Or maybe I'd be pretending not to hear the voice I tried to silence for so long. You don't have to agree with me. This isn't a manifesto. It's a confession. And maybe a mirror. Because if you've ever felt that quiet panic under the weight of someone else's dream, maybe this story was yours too. Maybe we're not broken. Maybe we're just waking up. And when we do, we don't run from love. We just stop mistaking it for escape. I didn't make this video to tell anyone what to do. Marriage isn't the enemy. Neither is love. But unconsciousness is. If you chase connection without knowing yourself, you'll always end up lost no matter who you're with. Carl Jung didn't say men should never marry. He said they should wake up before they do. So ask yourself, are you choosing love or are you escaping from yourself? Either answer can change your life. If this made you think or feel something you haven't put into words before, share it. Leave a comment. Tell your story. And if you want more truths like this, subscribe. We're not here to give answers. We're here to ask the questions that matter.